Chapter 3. My brother, the thorns. Once we arrived, I hastened with Belle to the place in the hedge opposite the apple trees. It was the very place where I had sat crying the evening before, when my little sister wiped my eyes with her handkerchief and comforted me so sweetly. I climbed up the bank and, working with my hands, made a deeper gap in the hedge, large enough to push my sister through. The thorns were stiff and sharp as a hunter's knife, and my hands and arms became sorely scratched and cut. But this did not thwart my determination to see my plan carried to the end. It is a true saying that the foolish are willing to wallow in the mire when they could be dining at the table. I then came down and, lifting my little Belle, said, "Now, sister, try to get through the hedge first, and I will help you, and when you are through, I will come after you." "Brother," she said, "I am frightened. I think we had better not try to get through the hedge. Perhaps our mother will be angry with us for it." She trembled as she spoke, but I persuaded and encouraged her, and at length she had put her head into the gap which I had made. Crawling for a short distance, where I could still see her feet, I persuaded her to go forward, but she whined that the hedge was too awful to get through. She said she could see a shaft of light in the breach, but wanted me to pull her out. While she lay in her crawling position, in a fit of passion, I pushed her forward with all my strength. But while I was thrusting her forward, she cried out in great agony, my brother, the thorns, the thorns!" Alarmed by her cries, I hastened to help her out of the gap when she became silent. Lifting her in my arms, I set her down, and to my horror saw that many large thorns had pierced her face, her head, and the sockets of her eyes. I was terribly frightened when I looked at her. The blood poured down upon her neck and upon the blue handkerchief which she had so lately been used to wipe away my tears. In my terror, I cried louder than my sister, and she awoke from her fainting. As I carried Belle in my arms, for what seemed like endless torment, our screams reached our cottage, where my mother was tending to the garden. She came running to the path to see what was the matter, and from the distance knew the seriousness of the circumstance. Finding her little girl covered with blood, she snatched her up in her arms and ran home with her, while I followed in my great agony of mind, which I can hardly now bear to recall. Soon my mother pulled the thorns from her face, as I watched in my most horrifying agony of spirit. My heart sank within me as I watched the thorns plucked from her eye socket, but I felt a little comforted when Mother was able to stop the bleeding with the compresses. Having bandaged up my little Belle's face, she made me sit down on my low chair and take her on my lap, and then insisted on my confessing how all this had happened. I thank God for the grace that He gave me to confess the whole truth, and to own how I had been tempted to break the bounds which were set for me, and to lead and almost compel my little sister to commit the same sin. My mother answered, "You have confessed your fault, and you have brought upon yourself a very severe chastisement, though not so great a one as you deserve. And now, therefore, I shall inflict upon you no other punishment than to look at your sister's bleeding and scarred face, and to consider that she is scarred and does bleed for your disobedience. And remember also," she added, "that this sin of disobedience to our Heavenly Father, and the wicked wish of breaking the bounds appointed by Him, is the very crime that made it necessary, in order to save us from hell, for the Son of God to lay aside His crown of glory and to put on one of thorns." My mother said no more to me at that time, but she left me quietly to reflect upon my sin and to hold my little sister in my arms till my father came. My heart trembled, not for fear of my father, though I knew he would reckon severely with me, but for my little sister whom I loved so dearly. How could I act so foolishly and commit this terrible thing against her? Can the pleasures of sin be so blinding? Dear finder of this document, as I lie here upon my sick bed, it is my earnest desire that it be read to young and old alike. May you take heed to its warnings. I beg you not to follow after vain and empty pursuits that may taste sweet for a while, but in the end will bring bitter consequences. If you are young, listen to your parents, for God has placed them as an earthly hedge that will keep you on right paths, which lead to blessing and long life. Don't forget that Lucifer, that one-time great angel of light and reflection of the beauty and glory of God, continues to deceive and entice with short-lived moments of pleasure. His reflective beauty is quickly fading, and his time is near the end. His desire is to entice and entrap as many a young person who is naive enough to follow. Flee youthful lusts, and follow hard after righteousness. Look not to the right or to the left when the tempter turns thorns into roses. Remember, it is not a sin to enjoy the fragrance of the rose, but he who grasps after its beauty carelessly will reap the pain and the suffering of its hidden barbs. Proverbs 10:1. A wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish son is the heaviness of his mother. It was at sunset when my father walked through the door. He looked down upon me, and then to my mother, and slowly walked to a room where they conversed privately. When father opened the door, he walked towards me, but did not utter a word. He gently picked up Belle and laid her in his lap as they sat in front of the fire. I will never forget the look on father's face when he heard the account of what I had done and saw the marks on my sister's face. He looked so sorrowful that it pierced my heart and hurt me more than if he had said a great deal to me. End of chapter 3.